Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My unparalleled co-host is Laura Blackwell. And I hope that you're all healthy and safe, taking care of yourselves, taking care of your loved ones. I started Story Hour during the early stages of the pandemic. We were all locked down, and I really wanted to just create a space where my writer friends and I could share our work with each other and just kind of build a little community. And shortly after that, Laura joined and in co-hosting with me. And after that, it just grew like crazy. And we've been at it for 2 years, nearly 3 years at this point. Is that nearly 3 years? Is that true? Yeah, that's crazy. And we have had just so many fantastic writers just come through these rooms and share their work with us. It's really been a privilege, and it has just grown way beyond my initial thoughts about the scope of this thing. So thank you all, listeners and folks who are listening to this who have shared your work with us in Story Hour. This is going to be our last Story Hour for this year. We take our single break. And we'll see you again in the new year. So keep coming back. Thank you so much for helping make this real. And the way this works is I like to think of it as kind of an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. So every week we've got two authors, just about 30 minutes each, and we do exactly that. So tonight we are really delighted to have returning author Rachel Unger and new Story Hour participant Sam Schreiber. So welcome to you both. Really looking forward to hearing your work. I'm also very happy to announce that we just received a SFWA Givers Grant for 2023 so that we can continue to keep the lights on and these virtual rooms open so that we can keep bringing you the best in spoken word speculative fiction. So thank you, SFWA. It's our custom to ask authors to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. If you're fortunate enough to be in a position to help financially, that's great. Please do it. If not, just be aware, spread the word if you're so inclined. Rachel is reading tonight for www.flatbushcats.org. Flatbush Cats exists to solve the cat overpopulation crisis in Brooklyn and beyond. They began as a small volunteer-led TNR, I believe that's trap, neuter, and release or return, and rescue group. But after rescuing hundreds of friendly strays and kittens, all of whom needed medical care, and after helping their neighbors TNR hundreds of feral cats on the same blocks, they noticed that new cats kept showing up year after year. They were working hard and not making a dent in the problem. So they've shifted their approach a bit. They're building a new high-volume veterinary clinic that will serve both low-income cat owners and rescue/TNR volunteers across Brooklyn. And once the clinic opens in early 2023, they'll be able to provide 7,500 or more annual spay and neuter surgeries, which systematically addresses the root of the cat overpopulation crisis. So take note, that's flatbushcats.org. Sam is reading tonight for Planned Parenthood, and I don't really need to tell you all about Planned Parenthood. It's truly an essential organization. They provide a huge range of services, among them abortion services, abortion referrals, birth control, HIV services, patient education, pregnancy testing and services, and much, much more. So that's plannedparenthood.org. And again, if you can donate real scratch, that's great. If not, just be aware and spread the word. So we are going to start tonight with Rachel Unger. When Rachel isn't staring down a microscope or riding a bicycle, she can be found extolling the virtues of Val Lewton's movies to anybody who will listen. And in her bio note, she says, start with The Body Snatcher. I absolutely concur. I would add also Cat People, Curse of the Cat People, I Walked with a Zombie, and many, many, many more. Wonderful work. Rachel's fiction, Val is sadly no longer with us. Rachel's fiction is forthcoming in On Spec, the Nemesis anthology from Wicked Taxidermy Press. That's a great name. And Pseudopod. And you can find links to her work online at www.fictionbuffet.com. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you. I have two stories I'll be reading tonight. Both of them take place around the end of the year. With regards to the first one, it's brand new. And I suppose as the only lead-in, I'm going to say, fellow students, we've got this. We can do this. The story is called Course Credit. Staring at the pile of sludge on her workbench, a pile which in no way resembled a functional golem, Ray groaned. I am so going to fail the lab final. She cast a wistful glance at the sewing machine and iron on the dresser, shifted from their usual position so Ray could practice, for all the good it was doing. Her roommate Amy huffed, bangs flying up with the exhalation. 2 textbooks sprawled across her lap like boneless cats. A third book lay upside down beside her on the twin bed. At least it's just one course for you, she retorted. Flyaway ends escaped her braid and burst from around her ears, the result of fretful hands and several hours of studying. I'm sunk in advanced theory and pure magic, which isn't magic at all. It's math. They should just call it for what it is. On the dorm room's other twin bed, their friend Serena didn't even glance up from her notebook. You will be fine, she said, her voice firm. You always panic, and you're always fine. The only evidence of Serena worrying were the bags under her eyes and the fact that she hadn't left the dorm room in 4 days. By now, she had probably memorized at least one set of notes. Even her box braids were immaculate. Ray loved and envied her in equal measure. Ray poked at the goo on the table. It didn't have any resistance. Maybe her parents had been wrong. Maybe she wasn't a witch at all. The galling thing was that magical theory made sense to her. Ray loved those classes, everything broken down into action and reaction, cause and effect. It was scientific and pure and beautiful. She could explain the unified theory with precise language and walk an examiner through the spellwork that formed the base of each connected part of the theory. But she couldn't animate a fetch or a golem, something any second year could do, nor summon any kind of animal familiar. She could barely light a candle 2 times out of 5. She couldn't perform any of the spells she could explain, and if she didn't figure something out, she was never going to graduate. Ray scraped up the remains of her last attempt into the wastebasket, lit a sprig of sage, and waved it over the basket and bench both. The smoke ring hovered like secondary containment over the protective circle she'd already drawn. Every limb dragged, both from the energy expended and despair. Pushing through the feeling, Ray put her sewing machine back into its pride of place in the center of the bench, and her purple and white iron beside it. Let's get you some water, she murmured. While she poured, the iron's feet extended, raising it up another inch toward her. I promise, we'll work on something tonight. That's a good idea, Serena agreed, flipping to a previous page. It always helps you focus, right? After plugging the iron in under the work table, Ray patted it like an old friend. It had helped her with more stress relief projects than she could count, letting her put her thoughts in order and generate something useful at the same time. It was a shame she couldn't get a course credit out of quilting. Amy dug her fingers into her hair again, pulling more strands loose from her braid, and warbled something unintelligible. Why can't I get this? She demanded. I've been staring at these calculations for 3 hours, and it doesn't make any more sense now than when I started. The sage smoke lurched sideways above the desk in a breeze. Serena closed her notebook, psionics, psychotropics, and dream work, and raised her eyebrows. Girl, we have this talk every semester. Remember last time when you were absolutely going to fail weather forecasting? That was a ton of math. And I barely passed it. And I wasn't the only one who freaked out and did badly, Amy snapped. But you did pass. Serena scooted to the edge of the bed and stood up. And my grades were so bad that now I'm on academic probation. And if I don't do better this term, I'll lose my scholarship. And Amy gestured, voice rising with every word. As the pages of the textbook on Amy's lap stirred and an entire chapter flipped over, Ray felt the last crumbling vestiges of her belief in herself erode. Hopelessness crashed over her. I'm going to fail, Ray whispered. I'll never graduate. Something else twitched in her peripheral vision, Serena flapping a hand, maybe. She was going to fail. It was as though she'd fallen down a well, the walls telescoping away through darkness to a tiny, unreachable world above. Ray watched her iron jitter toward her on the work table, certain that she'd somehow failed it as well as herself. The little feet on her iron extended and retracted in time with the sobs starting to climb out of her chest. Her poor iron, coming with her all this way. And for what? For nothing. That's what. Nothing. Just like Ray. And my parents said they can't afford the tuition, so if I fail, I'm going to have to drop out, Amy continued. No one will employ a half-trained weather witch. Why am I so dumb? Why can't I figure this out when everyone else? At her wail, the papers in the room lifted and began to swirl through the air. The hallway door slammed. Ray's iron began to hiss and billow. Steaming tears cut tracks into Amy's cheeks. She had stood up at some point, taking an angry step toward Ray and Serena. So dumb, Ray echoed, despair clogging her throat. Serena looked from Ray to Amy and back again, eyes widening. Then she slammed her hands together, intoning an unfamiliar word. A shockwave pushed Amy and Ray apart, Ray's desk chair sliding several feet back. All the papers plastered themselves to the walls. Ray's iron fell forward, saved from the floor only by its long cable. An unearthly stillness came over Ray, the anguish she'd felt earlier pushed farther back than the chair. It was like being in the eye of a storm. Huh, Ray said, even her surprise feeling very far away. I only feel this calm when I'm sewing. She turned from Serena's steepled hands back to her iron, raising and lowering itself on the desk as though trying to get Ray's attention. As Ray walked to it, lifting it back upright with an apologetic pat, the hallway door banged open. They all turned toward Professor Siglin as she thundered, "What did you do?" Amy's tears had stopped, though the burn lines remained as if she'd raked her face with her nails. Serena exhaled. We were studying, and Amy started to spiral. Only she started Ray spiraling too, and affecting objects in the room. Grounding them both to dispel the energy seemed like the right thing to do. I don't think Amy is a weather witch after all. Serena wrung her hands together in a way that was deeply unlike her, but then Ray's iron butted back against her palm, almost like a living creature, and distracted her. Maybe I should sew, Ray said, her iron calling to her, and Serena made some vaguely agreeable noise. Ray opened the dresser drawer that she'd stuffed with fabric scraps. Behind her, she was dimly aware of Professor Siglin asking Amy how she felt, what had happened. Amy had been on the verge of a breakdown, hadn't she? A quiet empathy puddled around Ray, a little closer than her surprise had been. Wouldn't it be kind to make something for her? Maybe it would boost Amy's confidence for the exam. Ray thought about Amy pulling at her hair the last few days, and then her hand fell on just the right fabric for a headband, and the plan took shape. The conversation around her faded away as she concentrated. With smooth, fluid movements, she pulled her iron inside the ring and began to press the blue fabric flat. She didn't even bother clearing the circle she'd drawn. When she put the iron back down, it helpfully levitated back up so it wouldn't burn the work surface. She patted it, smiling. Thank you, she whispered. Ray had done well on the pure magic exam. She remembered the clean layout she'd been able to outline, spells balancing each other to produce a layered effect. The key was remembering how to arrange them, their respective energy requirements and outputs. Snipping the stretchy fabric to the right size. Stretch helped so much with fitting, though not so much with quilting. Ray murmured the mnemonic she'd come up with for the exam. It had been such a good theoretical working, as clear to her as if she could actually do magic herself. Amy would have no trouble. The quietness in Ray's head seemed to have spread to the room. Her iron puffed a small cloud of water vapor, as contented as she felt right now. The headband came together with ease. Sitting back, she admired the spiraling design she'd been able to achieve around the loop. This had to help Amy. When she turned around, Professor Siglin and Serena were staring. Serena's psionics advisor had come in at some point and was sitting beside Amy on the bed. Ray exhaled, absently using the other hand to disperse the protective circle she'd drawn. She would clean up the rest later. She turned to her roommate, about to step forward with the gift when Professor Siglin took it out of her hands. Ray felt the heaviness settle back over her, her contentment evaporating. At least the despair didn't come with it. Glumly, she began to plan to get up early and cram what she could. Well, Ray said, my chances aren't great for that exam tomorrow, but hopefully this will help Amy believe in herself. Turning the fabric over in her hands, the professor turned her attention to Ray. You know, she said, I know you've just been the victim of an accidental brain-altering working, but you can't give someone an ensorcelled item to use during their final. You're a third year, you should know better. Clothes should make the witch, not help them cheat. Ray blinked, trying to make sense of this, and Serena grinned at her. Sewing always helps you focus, she said. Why did we never think of that? You've been winding yourself into not studying and everything got worse, but now look at what you did. The tiredness clung to every limb as Ray took the headband back. Now that she was paying attention, the runes she'd somehow stitched into it glowed. Wait, when did I do that? They also outlined every step of the exam problem. She ran a fingertip over the runes, and the prompting became a soft whisper in her ear. But I can't even make a fetch, she whispered, baffled and exhausted. What? It's an elegant solution, Professor Siglin said, but you've always been one of the better theory students. She tapped her fingers on her leg. It's also common knowledge that you've struggled the last few years with the more practical aspects. The second professor said to Amy, you'll need training for your latent talent, so you don't pull others into your emotions again. There's a special stipend for doubly gifted students like you and an academic grace year, so you don't worry about grades. Amy nodded, her hands loose in her lap. Professor Siglin held out her hand and Ray deposited the headband in it. The professor considered it before saying, you know, exam services really want students to book carts as early as possible. You'd better call them now. Carrying all of that will not present the impression of a prepared, organized witch to the examiner. She gestured at the sewing machine and iron, and a bloom of sheer euphoria chased away Ray's exhaustion. A mechanical familiar is certainly interesting. Then she and the other professor left, taking Amy with them. Ray and Serena beamed at each other. I knew you could do it, the other witch exclaimed. The iron let out another little gush of steam. Ray grinned before darting across the room to the phone. Hello, exam services, she said. My name is Ray Cassowary, and I have a lab practical exam tomorrow at 1 p.m. in Kerr Hall. If there are any left, I'd like to reserve a cart and request a space with a power supply. Thank you. The second story I have is a reprint. It was originally in Unfading Daydream. It's instead of being a contemporary, it's a retelling of a fairy tale. This one I feel like should have a bit more of a warning. It deals with trauma survival and more than a little rape culture. So if that's going to bother you, perhaps maybe go wander away for 10 minutes and then come back for Sam's story. This is called Winter Gifts. My father died during my birth. It's not the usual way of things, I know, but mine hasn't been the most usual life. I was born twice, once from the belly of a woman and once from the belly of a wolf. The huntsman was not the most careful midwife for that second birth, and while I emerged slick with blood but with life still in me, my father breathed no more. I thanked the huntsman for his quick work. I took the pelt, though I didn't know why at the time. Not a souvenir, nor a memento, nor bravado. I just took it and tanned it and kept it. I thought that was the end of it. I thought that the river water would wash away the remains of that afternoon. I didn't count on the nightmares. I didn't count on the villagers. The talk didn't start until after Red's wedding to the huntsman, after the two of them moved in with me. So I wouldn't be alone, Red said, and I let myself be convinced. And after my new grandson-in-law went back to the woods to ply his trade. I overheard it at one of the markets that fall. How sad it was that Red's husband was away so much of the time. How like one of the creatures of the woods he was himself, really. Almost like. Other whispers followed. Whispers about two women living in seclusion out in the forest. Women who had had perhaps too much contact with the wilder world. And it was terrible what had happened. Of course it was. You couldn't blame her. But it was also true that decent, good women were careful about who they let into their homes. It was probable that the wolf had just forced his way in, unless, well, it was possible she'd invited him in, wasn't it? And how did someone survive being eaten whole by an animal? Surely no one could live through that. No one human, anyway. I left before the word witch could be uttered, but after Red's mother began to shun us both. When the huntsman returned, we all fled. The two of them went south to continue their life together. Two newlyweds would be able to outrun rumors of a pair of witches in their thrall. And I set out north. I took some supplies, a few snares and a bow. I had hunted for myself for years, so it wasn't as much of a stretch as it could have been. I took the wolf pelt. I didn't expect to live long. I had grown grandchildren. I had had my fair share of life. Mostly, I left because I would rather die on my own terms than be hanged or drowned or stoned. It was a matter of time, but it would be my time. I kept walking. I fed myself. I grew leaner, but fitter. I kept walking and being a little surprised by it. I traded for supplies, sometimes, when I ran across a village and I needed something. The townsfolk eyed the gigantic pelt I wore and kept their distance. I kept moving north. The nightmares came with me. I found that the bow was useful for more than food. Other things found that I was not easy prey. I listened to the birds, and when they fell silent, I looked to my weapons. I found that there were wolves everywhere. I kept walking. I noted the colder mornings, the rime of frost on the ground, and how many of the birds had up and gone for the season. I didn't mind it. I wasn't getting any younger, even if I was stronger than I'd ever been. My stride was easy. My hand on a knife or an arrow was firm. I couldn't wrestle an animal to the ground, but I could take down something much larger than myself from a good distance. Several times, as it happened, from up a tree. I fingered my gray braid, eyed the snow on the crest of the far mountains, and traded for a pair of good boots at the next town. After all, I'd never seen the Kara Sea, and when else was I going to have the chance? I passed through the last of the taiga and into the tundra. The days deepened into more of a twilight with occasional night. I waited to see what the winter would bring. Mostly, it brought rabbits. One dim and frozen day, the winter brought me a bear. It was a bear of pale silver fur, moving so slowly across the plain that I almost didn't see it. I had no such coloration to protect me. The wolf, you see, had been dark gray. I stood out on the landscape like an ashy blot, looking out at the sea. It came fast. It wasn't as fast as some of the wolves, but it had also seen me first. There were no trees. There was nowhere to hide. I was sure my death approached, as I had been sure when the wolf burst through the door with its jaws wide. The bear ran for a few meters more, but then collapsed with a boom. The remaining eye turned down to the snow. I let it lie there for some time and approached from behind to be sure, my heart like a wild thing in my throat. It occurred to me that a white pelt would not only be warm, but would also blend in. It would be an excellent blanket, if nothing else. The problem was that I had no idea how I would tan the hide. I stilled my shaking hands and considered the problem. First, of course, I needed to deal with the meat. I woke that night to find the sky was on fire. Color rippled across the darkness like a curtain of light moved by the wind. I watched it, wrapped tight in fur, and marveled. There was a shout, more of a roar, someone angry, afraid, determined. I had made that same sound before. I gathered my pack and loosened my knife, and I slipped across the snow toward the noise. He stood with a dog sled on the ice. The animals harnessed weren't dogs, but reindeer. They were wild-eyed and nervous, and the man spent half the time keeping them under control and half fainting at the wolf pack circling closer. He was trapped between the black ice behind him and the dead reindeer in front, still in harness, blood dark on the ground. The wolves were confident. It was only a matter of time before the reindeer would bolt or they could get close enough to attack. The man either didn't have a bow or had used all of his arrows. There was a meal large enough for the entire pack, and all they had to do was take it. I took 3 of them before the rest broke and ran. The reindeer took one look at the giant wolf pelt descending the slope toward them and tried to do likewise. The man's hands on the reins, his voice on the wind, and my retreat were all that kept them from backpedaling onto the barely frozen expanse. When he had calmed them enough to walk to safety, he carefully approached. "Thank you," he said. His eyebrows under his fur hat were as gray as my own, his eyes a warm blue. "They would have killed us but for you." Curious, I looked him over. A trapper, possibly, with his fur clothes and dog sled rig. The reindeer, though, were interesting. "Why not dogs?" He answered without any of the usual bluster. "Dogs eat too much. These ones live here normally. Easier to feed when they can browse through the snow and are already used to doing it." "You live here?" "I have a place." He gestured behind him. "I left this afternoon, but then one of the wolves took the lead deer." He paused, considered me as I was considering him. "I would offer you a meal and thanks if you'd come there with me." We walked back to where he'd anchored the sled. "So you have a herd of these then? The wolves don't bother you?" The reindeer stamped, uneasy until they could smell my offered hands. "I don't like it," he admitted. "How many of my deer have been killed lately? I can't protect them all, not with traveling to the villages and hunting for myself." "It sounds like you could use another hunter around." He nodded. "Not many would live here, away from a town. Too quiet, too dangerous. Not many could survive." His gesture encompassed the world around, but also me, making tacit point of my ability to do so. He shifted one of the bags so that there would be room for us both on the sled. I noted the wooden toys lashed to the top of the pack. You're the one they speak of in the village south of here, I said. The one that brings presents to the children. He shrugged. The White Nights are months away. It is cold and dark. Why not bring something that will make them smile? What's your name? I asked as he started the team forward. They call me Chris, he said over his shoulder. I thought of the silver pelt and of a homestead where I could tan it myself instead of selling it. A homestead with a man unthreatened by women. Kind man. Chris, do you prepare your own hides? He laughed into the wind. Of course. Does it look like I have elves? The team surged ahead. We moved so light and fast across the snow. It was as though we could fly. Thank you.
Oh man, thank you so much, Rachel. Those were both lovely, and a huge emotional range between the two, and very different stories, but really nicely paired as well. Really, just absolutely lovely work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's our custom just to sort of pause for a moment between authors, just to let the work sort of resonate a little bit, just take a moment of quiet. And we're going to do that right now. Rachel Unger, folks. Thank you again, Rachel. Our next author, Sam Schreiber, is a writer living in Brooklyn with his wife and 2 cats. And Sam's bio notes say one is a genius bruiser, the other is a moody artist. I'm not sure if he's talking about he and his wife or the 2 cats. I assume the cats, but Sam's work can be found in such markets as Asimov's, Analog, Vesterian, a literary journal, as well as audio markets such as Escape Pod, Podcastle, Tales to Terrify, and others. He's an emeritus producer of the speculative fiction podcast, The Kaleidocast. You can find him on Twitter at Ozymandias, that's AHZIMANDIAS. That is as long as Twitter lasts for all of us, knock wood. Or at his woefully untended website, thesamschreiber.com. Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Rachel. I really enjoyed those stories a lot. I realize there actually is one update. There is a Christmas-themed sci-fi story of mine you could listen to on Escape Pod. It was originally published in Asimov's called Christmas at the Hilbert Astoria. Anyway, the story I'll be reading to you today is actually the story from Vesterian, which is a literary journal devoted to the works of the author Thomas Ligotti, both scholarship on his work and also original fiction. And while to the best of my memory, there is no actual profanity or super explicit moments, I would say that the themes and the topics are dark enough and adult enough that it may not be, and you know, maybe upsetting enough, it may not be suitable for all children. So parents beware. But yeah, without further ado, I would like to read for you my short story, Ennigaldi, from Vesterian. There we go. So, Ennigaldi. Say there is a small child trying to get his mother's attention while they wait for the subway. It's late and she is tired, which is why she doesn't notice when he wanders toward the edge of the platform, a foot or 2 from where you are standing. You consider saying something, but before you have the chance, the child slips on his shoelaces. There's a familiar rumble beneath your feet. The headlamp of an approaching train begins to glow around the corner of the tunnel. The child's arms windmill as he tries to regain his balance. This is where things get tricky. In one version of the story, you drop to your knees, catch the child by the arm, and pull him to safety. His mother turns just in time to see it happens. She rushes to her son, hugs his body to hers, and gushes with gratitude, which you accept before boarding the train. The 2 of them remain on the platform. Understandable. Only the child's mother saw what you did. She doesn't know your name and you don't know hers. But for the rest of the night and in years to come, you play the scene back in your mind. It's a simple private reassurance, and it gets you through some dark moments. Then there's the second version of the story. You reach out for the child, but this time his arm rebounds off yours. You will never know whether he would have regained his balance on his own or not. What you do know is that it is your touch that shifts his center of gravity over the train tracks. The child tucks and rolls, landing harmlessly the way children sometimes do, but you already know he only has seconds left. His mother screams as the train pulls into the station. Did she see you were trying to save her son? Or from her vantage point, did it look as though it was all your fault? You'll never know. You ran. Up the cement steps, out onto the street for blocks on end. You expected sirens. They never came. But for the rest of the night, and in years to come, you play that moment back in your mind. It's where your thoughts invariably arrive during dark moments. What's the difference between these two stories? Is it that in one you are fast and graceful, while in the other you are slow and clumsy? That you had a good night's sleep the night before, or stayed out late with friends? That you overexerted yourself at the gym that morning, or stopped for a cocktail early that evening? Is it a question of luck? Or are these two stories fragments of the same reality, like white light separated by a prism into its constituent colors? The answer doesn't matter just now, but it will. There is no dust in the museum, at least none you can feel when you run your fingers over the wood panels and glass displays. You've developed a theory or two on the subject. The museum has no discernible weather, and you are becoming increasingly certain there are no working exits or entrances. If there was no particulate matter in the museum to begin with, and only you to bring any in from the outside, is it any wonder there's none to be found now? Of course, there are an awful lot of assumptions baked into that explanation, not to mention unanswered questions. How you arrived in the museum to begin with barely scratches the surface. But science was never your strong suit, and in any event, the museum's conspicuous cleanliness is the least of its mysteries. Another thing the museum doesn't have is a map, at least not of itself. You have found maps of other things, charts dated from the mid-1980s onward, detailing your progress from one small town in the Pacific Northwest to another. There was a sepia-colored globe that filled up an entire room with broken red lines painted between Chicago and Glasgow, your cousin's wedding, which you attended in your late 20s, Bend, Oregon, and Manhattan, your summer internship between your sophomore and junior year of college, and a few other places. But there is nothing at all relating to the museum's layout, which isn't to say there isn't a certain curatorial logic to the exhibits and their relative position to one another. There is, but it's a logic you've had to piece together on your own. The Hall of Wine, for example, where 1,000 or so empty green bottles form a series of pyramids, branches off into dozens of different hallways. One, predictably, leads to a split-level garden filled with empty fifths of whiskey, rum, and other spirits. Another leads to the Hall of Sex, where hundreds of used prophylactics and their wrappers are pinned against corkboards like pressed butterflies. Other more risque souvenirs sit atop pedestals beneath warm pink and blue lights. Still another passage leads down a flight of stairs to a library of books you have read, books you meant to finish, and books that sat unracked on your shelf, all maddeningly encased behind thick glass. Like dust and maps, the museum is very much short unreadable texts. One thing the museum does have is gravity. You walk down the halls rather than float through them. There is up and there is down. From this, you tentatively postulate that the museum has a top floor and a bottom floor, though you have yet to discover either successfully. Then again, you sometimes wonder if the museum might not be some sort of Mobius ship or donut-shaped structure in space, that should you ascend high enough, you would merely arrive at the museum's lowest floor and vice versa. It's pure conjecture, really. As far as you know, the museum could extend infinitely in every direction. But of course, that would make no sense. Even if you don't understand the museum's purpose, you've learned enough to grasp its overarching theme. And no life, no matter how well lived, extends so far. Forget the child. The child was not the point of the story. He existed simply to disappear as the train pulled away from the platform, or to die gruesomely beneath its wheels. In either case, the point of the story was you, or rather, the two yous. The you whose life is elevated by the experience, and the you whose life is shattered by it. But of course, there are more than just two of you, aren't there? In point of fact, there are large and small infinities of you ebbing and flowing across the fulcrum of reality, like cosmic tide. There are some who find this concept comforting. It's a metaphysical card trick, a way of forgetting that no matter how you measure the ride, oblivion waits for you at the end of it. But imagine the barriers between the various iterations of you were to fall. Imagine nations of you finding common cause among one another, forging alliances, breaking them, fighting for dominance, as every passing moment makes it clearer and clearer that you are all running out of real estate in which to exist. Too abstract? Then imagine returning home to find your lover murdered by some other iteration of you, perhaps to nudge you onto a path that suits their needs, or perhaps in retaliation for a slight, yet a third iteration of you committed. Imagine finding your house, your office, or the city where you live burned down to its bedrock and knowing some other version of you is responsible. Better still, imagine watching through a collapsing aperture between realities as the fabric of space and time in a neighboring universe tears itself apart and knowing with grim certainty that you have done the right thing, or at least what needed to be done. Sit with that for a moment. The rest of us will wait. While it is possible to retrace your steps in the museum, it is not necessary in any strict sense. There are no dead ends. Every exhibit leads to another exhibit, mostly through twisting, circuitous paths. You would kill for a compass, a pad of paper, and something to write with. You lifted the Naugahyde divan from your grandfather's study in Pittsburgh and lobbed it against the glass protecting your journal from the 7th grade. The glass held. The Kennesaw multi-tool you brought with you to summer camp has a compass in it, but again, the glass, if it even is glass, proved unbreakable. Not everything in the museum is shielded or out of reach, just the things you want. You can't say for sure where you are in relation to where you started. Where and when you started is something you are less and less sure of. You are 30, maybe 40 floors beneath the now pristine 1986 Toyota you totaled off the New Jersey Turnpike, 2, maybe 3 miles east of the Black Room with the bleached white skeletons of 2 guinea pigs, 3 cats, a smattering of goldfish, and a Boston Terrier, all hanging in various poses by hooks and monofilament. Plaster impressions, you thought at first, but the dog's parietal bone was surprisingly coarse to the touch. That was the last time you recalled turning around and going back the way you came. It was when you realized that the deeper into the museum you went, the less you cared for the exhibits. By deeper, you think you mean further in any particular direction, but you could be wrong about that. Nonetheless, you've decided to try for the museum's bottommost level. This is not as easy as it sounds. Staircases are rarer than hallways, and they don't always go in the correct direction. Progress is frustratingly slow, but you have been disciplined. It could be your imagination, but the air feels ever so slightly danker the lower you descend. No drops of condensation form against the glass displays, but there is something softer and hazier about your surroundings, or maybe it's a trick of the lights. The vault takes you by surprise when you found it. It's a domed space, easily 1,000 feet high, at the bottom of a spiral staircase that takes many hours to descend. Blocks of buildings stretch out beneath the purplish black stone ceiling. Every house you've ever lived in, every office you've ever worked in, every store you've ever stepped foot in, even the Statue of Liberty, which you visited when you were 10 years old. They're all present and accounted for, though there's no obvious rhyme or reason to their layout. You can't enter any of the buildings, of course. The doors rattle when you try them, but each one is locked. Not exactly a surprise at this stage. You do not arrive at the vault's edge, but rather you suspect at its center. The structure you find there is an obelisk of sorts, a hexagonal cone in the same dark shade as the vault itself, which you suppose is how it managed to sneak up on you. It seems as though it should reach all the way up to the top of the vault, but it tapers off to a point instead. Deep grooves make crude parallelograms in the floor beneath your feet and begin to glow white hot as you approach the epicenter of the vault, perhaps of the museum itself. The obelisk appears to have 6 faces, at least at first, but the longer you look, the more you sense that there is more to the story. 6 is the organizing principle, perhaps, but just as a cartoon figure represents more than the 2-dimensional lines making up its composition, so too does the obelisk represent more than its protrusion into 3-dimensional space you occupy. You wait a very long time, longer, you think, than you spent descending into the vault. You can't be sure, but it feels as though the other faces of the obelisk, not just the other 5, but all the other faces, are coming alive. Then the obelisk begins to move. Its faces are sluggish as they turn on an invisible axis, tilt on their side, and open with a low stone groan. Your fingers twitch, as if remembering how to sign your name. Say there was a Sumerian princess who was also the high priestess of sin and the headmistress of an entirely different order of priestesses in the city of Ur. Her name was Ennigaldi, and more importantly than any of that, she was the curator of the world's first museum. Or so historians and archaeologists tell us. What they often fail to mention, or perhaps even grasp, is the full extent of why this is important. Understand that without Ennigaldi, there would be no such thing as a university, no such thing as a library. We may have stumbled onto some understanding of the sciences and poetry without her assistance. At the end of the day, human ingenuity is a river cutting a path through the hard rock of an unfriendly, unforgiving world. But that river's path is no foregone conclusion. There are moments, and make no mistake, we're discussing one now, when history doesn't simply happen. It is written into being. For you, it might have been baseball cards, vinyl records, or out-of-print novels, your mother's jewelry, or your children's crayon drawings. But at some point in your life, you have reached out to steal a piece of the world, to shield it from the winds of time, to dare the impossible and take up arms against the literal will of the universe. This desire, this need, is the gift of Ennigaldi. Well, one of 2. The uncountable faces of the obelisk fan open, and you find yourself climbing a short flight of stone steps. The light from the lettering beneath your feet grows unbearably bright. Before you realize what is happening, whiteness overtakes you. It is difficult to know exactly when you regain consciousness, mostly because you are on your back, looking up at a cloudless white sky. The sand beneath your body is black, and so are the waves, lapping at the shore a short distance away. No, not waves. You're lying on the bank of a burbling river. On the other side, nearly at the horizon, is a pure white ziggurat. It would be difficult to make out against the sky were it not for the black corona outlining its shape. You wade into the black water. It's as cold as a lake frozen over in the winter. You should fear for your extremities, for hypothermia, for drowning. But you've begun to understand the time for such worries is over. You let the current take you downstream, making steady progress toward the far shore. It isn't so very different than fighting your way down to the vault or waiting for the obelisk, to open. It simply takes patience. You allow yourself some rest once you climb out of the river. There is no sun in the sky above you, but somehow your clothes dry out slightly after you twist the black water out of them. You're merely wet and not sopping when you continue toward the ziggurat. It would have been easy to miss the black, vaguely pyramidal shape extrusion in the sand. It is only 6 or 7 inches high, but there is literally nothing else but the ziggurat to catch your eye. You sit on your haunches to examine it. Plastic, you realize, with a pale scuff mark, and you squint. The letters RCA, encircled by an oval, are embossed on the side. You excavate around the extrusion with your fingers and then your hands, finding the sand gives way. When you were 3 years old, you stood atop your parents' television set. Physical bravery was more your style at that age than any other. No more Sesame Street, your mother said sternly as she swept up the broken shards of the screen from the floor. You were too stunned by the tumble you'd taken minutes earlier to object. Unlike your Toyota, the TV still shows signs of the abuse. The screen, you discover as you pull the set out of the sand, is cracked and spider-webbed. One of the rabbit ear antennae is bent at an odd angle, and the power cord hangs limply from the oak-colored box. I think what Robbe-Grillet is getting at is the artist needs to sign their work. You hear a voice crackle. You drop the television back into the sand as if it had shocked you. Warped green and purple shapes fluctuate behind the broken glass as the voice continues through damaged speakers. It's not showing off, not exactly. It's more like carving your name in a tree, telling the world you were there. You can't do that in a way that you're sure is going to make any sense to anyone else 10, 20, 100 years from now. The world has to meet you on your terms. There's nearly as much static as there is signal, but you can't pretend you don't recognize the voice that is speaking. Certainly one way of looking at things. You hear a second voice chuckle. The screen dies with a quiet thump. Blackness converges on its center, leaving a single fading point of light. You shake the set, but it's no use. The answer is yes, by the way. The version of you who saved the child on the subway platform and the one who may or may not have been responsible for his death, they're both real. They're both you. They both happened. They both enter Ennigaldi's obelisk. They both find themselves at the foot of her ziggurat. You all do, eventually. The corona isn't black, you realize, as you approach the ziggurat. It's every color of the spectrum, from piercing violets to warm red. But it's easy to see how you made the mistake. It's as if the ziggurat is perfectly positioned to occlude some distant, impossibly radiant black star. You consider walking past the ziggurat to see if you're correct. You've come this far, after all. But something inside you clenches uneasily at the thought. Even here, at the end of everything, there are limits. Not every television set is meant to be dug up. The entrance to the ziggurat is an archway. The light from the sky fades away as you turn the corner inside. The black sand beneath your feet is now black marble. The alabaster walls are impossibly illuminated by light with no source, just like in the museum. You've returned. Perhaps you never left. This is what it means when we talk about the aesthetic of collection. You hear a voice echo from down the hall. It isn't meant to be natural. It's humanity's imprint upon nature. You follow the sound down the hall and find yourself entering an amphitheater. Upon the proscenium, sitting at the top of a column about 5.5 feet high, sits your old clock radio. Your voice, a little reedier than it sounds in your own ears, continues to recite your graduate thesis. And yes, it is reasonable to view this imprint as fundamentally oppositional. The universe is an entropic place. We are, at the end of the day, a parade of ephemerality marching towards nothingness, which makes the collector something altogether different than what we have previously conceived of. You walk toward the podium. Your recorded voice takes on a more stentorian quality as it finds its rhythm of your address. We like to think of the collector as incurably afraid of breaking the rules. Remove Kenner's Obi-Wan Kenobi doll from its original packaging? Blasphemy. Touch an original print of Action Comics #1 without gloves? Death is too kind of fate. You approach the clock radio. Like the television set, its power cord dangles freely. You wonder what would happen if you smashed the device against the proscenium floor. But consider, the collector is, first and foremost, a rule breaker. There is an established order to human existence, and objects are relegated well below people. We may not always like it, but we understand that a man may buy a priceless Fabergé egg from a private collector simply for the pleasure of crushing it beneath his boot. We understand that if a maniac threatens to kill a human being or set fire to a Samuel Johnson dictionary, we'll do our best to protect the book, but the life of the hostage comes first. What sets the collector apart from the rest of humanity is their willingness to subordinate the animal below the artifact. It's not simply rebellion, it's perversion. You pick up the clock radio from its column, feel your voice vibrating through its beige plastic encasement. On the face of the podium, beneath where the clock radio sat, there is a relief of a naked woman perched atop 2 lions, flanked by 2 owls, with wings and talons like a harpy's. The lines of her face are elegant in their sphinx-like simplicity. Empty white eyes look up at you with surprising warmth. And yet, what we must not forget is that the collector is emphatically interested in the fruits of human endeavor, what we create, what we admire, what we worship, in one fashion or another, are holy relics. It would be a mistake to think of the collector as indifferent to human drama, to the messiness of the organic. No, what we must understand that the ethos of the collector is, at long last, the ethos of You let the clock radio slide from your hands. It clatters to the floor, cutting off your last words. You would sob if any part of you was still capable of it. The proscenium, you realize dully, is an enclosure unto itself. There's nowhere left to go but back the way you came. Thank you.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. I really enjoyed that. Oh,
We're such lucky people, Daniel.
we are so freaking lucky, man. Rachel Unger, Sam Schreiber, thank you for closing the year with a real bang for us. Wonderful stories. Thank you for sharing your work with us and with folks who are listening. This just makes it worthwhile, right? It really does. So as I said at the beginning, next week, so 1 week of the year, we take off. So we will not be here. You're welcome to show up, but nobody will be here. So well, you probably shouldn't. But next year, January 4th, we have 2 Story Hour veterans, Evgenia Trantafalu and Premi Mohammed. And yeah, it's going to be a great program. So so come on by. So Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you again for coming back, and all the writers out there listening for sharing your work with us. Listeners, thanks for coming back and helping us spin the fictive dream here. Happy New Year, everybody. See you next year.